This
I,
conference will now be recorded.
ladies
This
and gentlemen,
conference will now be recorded.
I, Dr. Karuna, Associate Professor of English, Coordinator IQAC, and Co-Coordinator for today's webinar, take the opportunity to welcome you all to the webinar on gender sensitivity through the works of literature. Literature is the garden of wisdom, but the expression of thoughts of society. Books are specimens of the conversation of an age, preserved in the spirit of taste and of genius. I welcome our college chairperson, Professor M. Usha, and also the convener for today's webinar. Honorary Secretary and Correspondent, Professor M. Srinivas, Principal, Dr. Rajeshwari, and Vice Principal, Head of the Department, Dr. P. Rajalakshmi. Today's guest speaker, Professor Smita Roy, and my dear participants. Let's start the program with a prayer by our student, Ms. Maitri.
Good morning, ma'am.
Maitri, we have your recording now.
Yes, ma'am. Ya kundendu tusharahara dhawala ya shubhra vastrānvita ya veena varadanda mandita kara या श्वेत पद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युत शंकर प्रभृतिभिः सदा पूजिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती वेदाध्यापः।
Thank you, Maitri. Now I request P. Rajalakshmi, Vice Principal and Head Department of English, to give theme of this seminar.
Good morning to all. Respected Chairperson Ma'am, Professor Usha Garu, Secretary Sir, Professor Srinivas Garu, Principal Dr. D. Rajeshwari Ma'am, today's guest speaker, Professor Sumita Rai Madam, and Dr. Karuna Devi, seniors, my dear colleague, and all participants. This is Dr. P. Rajalakshmi, Vice Principal, Andhra Mahila Sabha Arts and Science College. The Department of English is conducting second nation level webinar on gender sensitivity through works of literature. Gender sensitivity is a modification of behavior by raising awareness of gender inequality concerns. It is a basic requirement to understand the sensitive needs of a particular gender. It helps us to examine our personal attitude and beliefs and question the realities that we thought and we know. Educational spaces instill through and take one have a perception that they believe. We are eagerly waiting to know from our resource person, Professor Sumita Rai Madam, the various texts which talk of gender sensitivity through literature. With these few words, I would like to thank Professor Sumita Rai Ma'am for accepting our invitation to be the speaker for today's session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Principal of our college, to give a message. Hello, Rajeshwari ma'am.
Good morning, everybody. A warm welcome all to this webinar. This is Dr. Rajeshwari, Principal of Andhra Mahila Sabha Arts and Science College for Women. It is my privilege to say a few about our college. Andhra Mahila Sabha Science College for Women established in the year 1968 by Padma Vibhushan Durga Deshmukh, Hyderabad, affiliated to Usmania University. It caters to the higher education needs of women with a vision to empower them for living better lives. Has completed its journey successfully for more than 50 years. We are continuing the impart quality education in accordance with the changing needs of the society. Our college has autonomous status with NAC accredited. The college offers both UG and PG courses in arts, science streams, business and commerce. I am proud to say that our college is one of the premier institution under the umbrella of Andhra Mahila Sabha. There are 29 units. In Chennai, 8. In Telangana, 20. And Andhra Pradesh, 1. Catering under Andhra Pradesh Sabha, working under it and catering to the needs of women, education, health, uh, and children. And in our college is one of the best college in Twin Cities. We are having well experienced teaching faculty and esteemed management. Our chairperson, Professor Usha Madam, our correspondent, Professor Srinivas sir, they are always concentrating with and focusing the quality of education to the students and growth of the institution. And we are having well-equipped labs, science labs, English lab, and commerce labs. And we are offering both UG and PG courses and all add-on courses and COC programs, career-oriented courses. Mainly, it is funded by UGC, Aquaculture, and EDP. And the Department of English is organizing webinar today. I am congratulating the organizers and thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Once again, thank you one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I request Dr. Karuna Devi, IQAC coordinator, to introduce our today's speaker.
Sir.
Okay. Sorry. Now I request Professor M. Srinivas, honorary correspondent, to give his message. Sir. Hello, Srinivas sir. Please unmute your mic.
Is sir there?
Yes, ma'am. Srinivas sir.
Sir, good morning, sir. Srinivas, sir. We request you to give your message. तुम बोल दो next.
Now I request Dr. Karuna Devi, IQAC coordinator, to introduce our today's speaker.
Thank you, Fauzia. A good teacher can inspire. Unmute, sir, mute all of them.
Aruna, you are also muted.
Yes, ma'am. Is it audible now? Yeah. A good teacher can inspire hope, ignite the imagination, and instill a love of learning. It is a cherished goal of many teachers to be a friend, philosopher, and a guide to her pupil. but it often remains a distant dream, as only few endeavor it, attain success in making it a reality. One such distinguished personality who imbibed the professional qualities of a true teacher and a true spirit is always remembered by her student turned fan as a guiding force is none other than my beloved teacher, Professor Sumita Roy. Professor Sumita Roy, former head department of English, Osmania University, has taught at the university for 25 years. She has guided 11 PhD and 12 MPhil scholars in American, British, Canadian, comparative, Indian, and Anglo-Indian literatures, working on poetry, drama, fiction, and prose. Madam has completed several research projects sponsored by the UGC on Indian philosophic prose and soft skills. She has written and co-edited about 40 books and published more than 42 articles in national and international journals. She regularly delivers lectures at different UGC, academic staff colleges, academic institutions, government, and private organizations. In 2006, Madam was awarded the prestigious Books of Book Award by the Federation of Indian Publications, New Delhi, for her publication entitled Never Say No to Life. Madam is simple and not for self-glorification. However, to tell in brief, she has vast experience as a teacher in various capacities. Her thirst for knowledge and passion for academics is reflected in the profession she has chosen. Her attempt to inspire the student community by her unique caring and sharing approach is an example by itself for others to emulate. Her concern for the cause, keeping the expectations of the students in mind, is worth following. We are honored to have you today, ma'am, on this webinar, and I welcome you. And I also request you to take over to start with the session. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Karuna. First, I must give my greetings to Professor Usha, my very good friend, and thank the administration and the Department of English of Andhra Mahila Sabha, because again and again I visit your university. Today I'm visiting you virtually, and I'm meeting a whole lot of my own students. I can see Naresh on the screen, and I'm sure many students, some very good friends, are all present here today. It's only because of Usha's asking me that I took this.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt you. Please, I request all the participants to switch off your cameras and mute your microphones. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, instruction. That is most essential. I hope I am audible. If anybody feels that they can't hear me, please let me know. So as I was suggesting that it was only Professor Usha who asked me, and these days there are so many webinars that we are getting breathless speaking at them and participating in them. But I thought I must honor my friendship and also my own student Karuna. I'm very fond of Raji Lakshmi also, because she's all the time keeping in touch. Let me try to share with you some of my ideas today, and then we will have a little time for questioning. Please remember that your suggestions, your questions, your comments are as important as my speaking. So ideally it should be 45 minutes, but maybe as a teacher, I might speak for an hour and leave half an hour for questioning. I would request that questions are not cut short, of course, within the time. If you give your questions on the chat box, maybe the organizers will read it out to me. Otherwise, if you raise your hand, they will call you one by one. Once the half an hour is finished, all those who have questions will try to resolve them themselves. Please remember, nobody is a better teacher for us than our own mind. So with this small, digression, let me come to the topic. I chose the topic gender sensitivity through works of literature for one simple reason, and that is, for the last few years, a course in gender sensitization has become very important in universities, maybe in colleges also, and I don't know about schools, but everybody is talking about gender sensitization. Very often, as I was in high-level committees of gender sensitization, I found that people are not really talking about gender sensitization. In fact, they are increasing the differences between the two genders by widening this gap in introducing courses which do not have a very positive mindset. So I thought that this is very important. Since I'm a teacher of literature, relating it to literature becomes also very important, because this is a multidisciplinary area. If any of you wants to do research, I'm sure you can explore, because here is sociology, psychology, economics, politics, linguistics, and of course literature, which is mentioned in the topic. So all these multiple layers of human endeavor are available in this topic. So instead of calling it gender sensitization, I have called it gender sensitivity. I'm sure the audience must be all English teachers. They will easily know the difference between sensitization and sensitivity. Sensitization is an external factor. Somebody is making us sensitive, whereas gender sensitivity is what comes from within. We feel that gender has to be sensitively treated by each of us. Real education would mean that we are sensitive to gender. Therefore, the first thing to know is about gender and gender sensitivity. Before I begin on the texts, I would like to speak about this. We have two terms when we are talking about gender. We often refer to this. I'm sure if any of you teaches a paper on gendered literature or on gender sensitization, you must be talking about this. We talk about sex and gender as two different words. Very often these are synonymous, but then when we do research, please remember that sex and gender are not synonymous as far as academics is concerned, because sex refers to the biological, physical entity, the physiological dimension, and gender refers to the attitudes, the behavior, the psychological dimension, the mental, the spiritual, etc. All those things are included here. Now, when we talk in terms of gender, we usually make a difference by saying, there are many genders. Earlier, we used to talk about human beings as only masculine and feminine. But today we don't call, after the LGBT movement, we have gender which is non-masculine or non-feminine also. We have to be very sensitive to all these. This is what we must remember when we are talking about gender. So I'm leaving doctors. It is a role of a scientist. My aim is to talk about somebody's mic is on. May I request the mic to be switched off? Neelam Kumari was, I saw was talking. If any of your mics are on, please switch it off, because even the background noise might drown my voice.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt. Please, can you be louder, because many participants are messaging that they are not audible.
Okay. Just check.
No,
Is it
madam is very loud. Madam is audible enough. I think
maybe the Wi-Fi of the people who are not able to hear is a problem in this case, because often in the webinars of late, I'm seeing that those who can't hear have
Yes, ma'am. It's very clear, ma'am. We can hear you very clearly.
Yes. So I'm talking loudly, of course, but if you want me to be louder, I can.
No, ma'am. No, you can be at your own ease, ma'am. Please.
People who are sending messages, organizer, the lady who spoke to me just now, ask them to check up their Wi-Fi and ask them to check up their volume of their system which they are using, computer or smartphone. Please ask them to do those things. These are bound to happen because all of us are moving into the digital platform lately, so we make mistakes, no problem. Let us all try. Now, if you still can't hear, please check your own connections. Okay, connection here is fine. Today I have no problem. One day I also had a problem. Today I don't have. And since Usha and Karuna are able to hear, they told me, I'm sure clarity is not a problem on this side. Okay, please sort out your issues. Anyway, the session is usually recorded, so don't get worried if you can't sort out. We should not get stressed out by moving to the digital platform. We should keep our mind unstressed. Now let me move on to what I was saying. I was talking about the gender aspect, the psychological dimension, the dimension which is attitudinal. So gender usually is given to us from childhood by what we call as conditioning. Gender conditioning, a term is used for this. We call it gender typing. Gender typing means boys should never cry. Boys should be always very strong. This is the conditioning we are given from childhood. Girls should be very weak. You should not try to assert yourself. This is gender typing, where their fixed jobs are being given for fixed genders. This is continuing for generations and centuries. Therefore, we have problems of gender sensitization. So if we want to become gender sensitive ourselves, if we want to educate our future generations in gender sensitivity, which comes from within, we should remove this gender typing first. We should explain to them that gender is only because we have been conditioned like that. If you remove that conditioning, then gender sensitivity becomes easier. People who are highly conditioned cannot accept the sensitization courses, because if you give a course of gender sensitization to a class, a mixed class of boys and girls, you will often find either laughter or boredom, either argument or counter argument. They are not willing to accept. Gender typing makes us inflexible. Therefore, we need to move to flexibility in order for us to be gender sensitive. That is the first point to remember. When we are talking about texts, these ideas you have to apply to the text which you're reading. Then you have gender equality, which we often speak. But then I would use another term, and that is gender equity. So here are two terms, equality and equity. As a commerce professor, Usha can tell us much about equity, but she will talk in terms of commerce. I'm telling you here in terms of human behavior. So both equality and equity talks about fairness. The treatment should be fair to everybody. All genders should have the fair treatment. That is what it implies. But where equality implies that same treatment should be given to all the genders, that is equality. Same treatment to all genders. It doesn't work everywhere. It works in the field of economics. Suppose we are talking about pay. So one job, one pay. So whichever gender you belong to, whichever sex you belong to, you have this equality, and that is you get the same pay. That is the economical dimension. But in very often there are dimensions of equity. Equity would imply that you give different treatment depending on different needs, but there should be no discrimination. Difference without discrimination, that is equity. Equity would mean that both genders or all the numerous genders are getting equal opportunity. But the opportunity need not be something which is exactly one-to-one in a parallel. That is very significant for us. So gender typing, if we are able to overcome, then we come to the second stage, equality and equity. This second stage, equality or equity, would obviously imply that we have to choose in which context equality is fine, in which context equity is fine. And then when we are reading a literary text, we must remember that sometimes it teaches by a negative example. If you see a lot of violence in movies and you ask the people, why are they making violent movies? They'll tell you that by seeing violence on screen, people will become non-violent. I'm sure all of you remember Aristotle's catharsis. This is what he said, that if you show pity and fear, then people get over those emotions. Whether this happens or not, we do not know. But certainly when we are analyzing a text, the negative example for us becomes a positive lesson for sensitivity. Now we come to the third most important point as far as gender sensitivity is concerned, and that is gender neutrality. Gender neutrality would mean that we are not specifically pointing out by gender. For instance, in language, a lot of gender neutrality has been done today. When you're writing your research papers, if you write he to represent humanity, then you have to write S/HE. That means she and he both. That way you are removing this gendered narrative. Similarly, a sportsperson is no longer called a sportsman or a sportswoman. We don't use sportsman anymore, we use sportsperson. Similarly, in our university, we constantly use chairperson instead of chairman. But I have noticed during my tenure, I noticed that as long as a lady is sitting in the chair, they say chairperson. The moment a gentleman takes over, immediately the nomenclature changes to chairman. That is not sensitization. That is not sensitivity. That is not neutrality. So we need to work towards neutrality, not only in nomenclature, not only in words, but in our mindset also. Gender neutrality in mindset is the real point of sensitivity, where you do not treat men and women in your life differently. You do not differentiate or you do not marginalize the other genders who come under the LGBT category. If we can do this, if we have a neutral attitude, an attitude which is positive towards everybody, then we have reached gender sensitivity. This is what I wanted to give you as an introduction to what I wanted to say. Now, when we come across this term gender, very often people think that feminism and gender are the same. Gender studies, feminist studies, these are the same. But let me make a difference here, especially those of you who are doing research in this area, not only for your PhD, but for writing a research paper also. Please keep in mind that feminism and gender are two different things. Very often radical feminist is gender insensitive. Here I'm making a very, very controversial and very, very important statement. You can argue with me, you can fight with me, you can do everything. I would be happy, because that is what academia is all about. We exchange ideas. Feminism, radical feminism, and gender neutrality or gender sensitivity are two different things. They are opposite poles. That is why in most gender sensitizing courses, I found that women are given priority, hierarchically high. Tell women, that they should be like this, they should be like that. And the other gender is often criminalized. They are often told as not good enough. Now, I cannot teach such a gender sensitizing course in a class where there are 50% boys and 50% girls. What are you going to make of them? Enemies of each other? So we need to be very careful in this. Feminism is talking about women's studies. Gender is talking about men, women, and all the other genders included in this study. Therefore, when you are reading a literary text, please keep these. When we read a text, we make a framework. We prepare a frame in which we weave the text. That is how interpretation is done. All of you have done research, so you know how it is done. Therefore, I gave you the framework. Now I'm going to talk about texts. I start with two nursery rhymes. Nursery rhymes are what you might learn when you are not even going to school. They might teach you at home itself. The first one is Baba Black Sheep. Have you any wool? Yes, sir, 3 bags full. Now the next line is very significant. One for my master and one for my dame. At one point, it is gender neutral because it gives both master and dame. But if you're talking about gender sensitivity, then you come to hierarchy. So what should be the hierarchy? Should the man come before master or the dame? Or dame should come before or master? Or should there be one word which qualifies both genders? You see gender neutral words like teacher, parent. You don't know whether it is man or woman. We don't know parent means father or mother. Teacher means sir or madam. So like that. Of course, Baba Black Sheep has run into a lot of problems because of racism. I won't go into that because it says Baba Black Sheep. But here you see the line which says master and dame. So when you read the nursery rhyme, do you think about this? Do you think how gender typing has been done to your child, to the student who comes to you from the nursery rhyme time, and now you have to neutralize that inflexible gender conditioning? That is so difficult. Then we have another one, which I don't know, I'm sure you might have seen a picture also. If you haven't, please go to the internet today and see. Peter, Peter, pumpkin eater, had a wife and couldn't keep her. Look at the word, had a wife and couldn't keep her. Now, keep here means earning, keep means controlling, so many meanings of the word. So you say women lower, the wife is in the control of the husband. So again, you have gender typing, you have again conditioning. Kept her in a pumpkin shell. If you look at the picture, you will find pumpkin is there. There is a small window which is barred and the door is locked. It is all in a pumpkin shell. And the husband is standing outside. The key is in his hand. The wife is locked inside. He kept her in a pumpkin shell and there he kept her very well. Which means what? That you are giving clear instructions that one gender has to be oppressed by another gender. So these are the problems when we are doing a course in gender sensitization, or when we are talking about sensitivity, which has to come from within. We are not looking at the real text. We are not looking at the real context, which is making people already gendered in their mindset, so they come. I remember a student who was studying in BITS Pilani had some problems, so came to speak to me because the parents were known to me. He says, "Oh, my mother, I cannot listen to her. She is uneducated." The father has a good job, government job, therefore he listens to the father, but not the mother. Can you see the gender conditioning of the family, which is showing gender differences from childhood? Now, neutrality does not come by making father and mother equal. Neutrality comes when this child thinks of father as parent, mother as parent, and gives equal treatment to both without realizing that this is father and this is mother. This would be the real sensitivity. Then we move on to some texts. I'm starting with Shakespeare because in Shakespeare you have both. In plays like As You Like It or Twelfth Night, you see in As You Like It Rosalind or in Twelfth Night Viola, both of them are dressed as boys in most of the part of the play. We know when somebody teaches us Shakespeare, they tell us this, that because all characters in those days were boys, so Shakespeare was writing for the stage where it's better for the boys to do like boys. But 400-500 years later, when we read this text, that constraint is gone from our mind. Then what do we see? We find that Rosalind is a much powerful character. She has many traits which are gender neutral when you compare to Orlando, who's the hero, or when you compare to any of the other characters, her own uncle, that is the Duke, her own father, who is the Duke who has been taken away from his dukedom. His dukedom has been usurped. So if you read As You Like It again today, you finish this and then go back and read As You Like It, you can really see the gender structures, how gender is being differentiated, how gender is being merged, how neutrality is coming at the level of the mind. The same applies to Twelfth Night, which many of you might have read as your prescribed text in MA. Now, we spoke about many aspects of gender as well, many aspects of the play, but we might not have spoken much about gender. You must remember that the play begins with the lines of the Duke Orsino, who says, "Let music, if music is the food of love, play on." I'm just quoting from memory. I don't exactly remember. If music be the food of love, play on. Now, usually, music is supposed to be very idealistic, very feminine. In the gender typing, in the gender conditioning, we say, all girls should learn how to sing. No problem, boys, if they can sing, very good. But girls, usually, girls in particular strata of society, were all taught to sing. When they would come to see the girl for marriage, they would say, "Can you sing? Please sing." This you must have seen in many of the black and white movies. This was the situation. So what do you find? You find the first lines itself, there is a gender neutrality, where Orsino is saying, "Play the music because I want to forget." Now, the Duke is supposed to be very hardworking. He's supposed to be very decisive. He's supposed to be authoritarian. We don't find the Duke like that. All these decision-making powers and abilities we find in Viola, the heroine of the play, where she goes dressed as a boy, as a man, and Olivia falls in love with her. So you can imagine now the problem. Today, if you read it from the 21st century, you might read it as a lesbian relationship. That, okay, Olivia falls in love with a girl, no problem. We have these issues also today. But maybe Shakespeare was not using that there because Olivia thinks of Viola as a boy. Luckily, Sebastian, the twin, is there, so the play is saved. So you can imagine how many aspects of gender, whether it is gender equality or it is gender equity or gender typing, or the best point, gender neutrality, are there in the play. I can't go into all the details, but I can only tell you that you can read this. You will find that Shakespeare's plays usually, except possibly Taming of the Shrew. Taming of the Shrew is very gender typed, but many of the other, his Comedy of Errors, for instance, these have given a lot of role to gender equality, gender equity, gender sensitization. These are there. Look at the tragedies of Shakespeare. Now, if you look at Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, when COVID-19 came to us and we were constantly washing our hands, I'm sure you must have seen many messages on WhatsApp forwarded, which was comparing us to Lady Macbeth because she keeps washing. The guilt is Lady Macbeth's, because she is the one who instigated the murder. The king came to their house, the king was murdered. The actual murder is done by the man, but it is Lady Macbeth who instigates. So you can see easily gender typing is done. You know, Macbeth is very good, Lady Macbeth is terrible. Then you have the three witches, you know, the three witches who predict that Macbeth will be king, and that is how his ambition is fostered. That is why he thinks that I can kill the king and do something wrong to become the king. But of course, he forgets the second part of the prophecy. I won't go into that. I will only tell you about the three witches. So the term three witches has become a term for curse, because witchery was something for which women were burnt in the Middle Ages. The term witch was a very dangerous term. If you read the Middle Ages stories, or if you read Shaw's Saint John, you know, the whole scene of the Inquisition is there in Shaw's Saint John. Saint John is a powerfully gender neutral text. If you talk about Saint John, although since I mentioned it now, from 16th century to 20th century, I have jumped, but I don't think I will have time to go through all the texts.
Ma'am, can you unmute yourself? Smith ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize that it got muted. I'm sorry. I will repeat myself. I said that sainthood, the word saint, does not have gendered connotation. A man is a saint, a woman is a saint, and so on. Therefore, we have Saint Teresa. We don't say Saintess Teresa. You know, Mother Teresa has been canonized now, our own Indian version. Therefore, you can understand that by using the term Saint Joan for Joan of Arc, who was an ordinary peasant girl, the title itself is giving you gender neutrality. And the manner in which we find the entire story, you know, the first three scenes where Joan performs what we call as miracle. You know, this is secularization of language, which of course will need one whole hour. I won't go into it now. This kind of a gendered structure where people do not meet her because she's only a girl, and then she conquers them and advises them, forgetting that she's a girl, leading the army although she's a girl, and no soldiers in those days were women, shows you Shaw's attempt at gender neutrality. Look at Joan as a human being. You know, this is most important in gender neutrality. Don't look at men as a different species, women as a different species. Instead, consider men and women to be the same species, and that is the human species. There might be some differences. Are there not differences between sisters and brothers, or sisters and sisters, or even twins? There are differences. So like that, between genders, there are differences. So you read a play like St. John, you get many of the things which I mentioned initially. You can also look at a text like Congreve's The Way of the World. There is a scene in this where Mirabell and Millamant, the hero and heroine, I'm mentioning texts which all of you must be familiar with. I hope all of you are familiar with them. Otherwise, you can read them up. That will be wonderful. There is one scene called Proviso Scene. Mirabell and Millamant are getting married. This is a restoration drama which gives maximum gender neutrality in the history of British drama. So here, Mirabell and Millamant are bargaining. They are not bargaining for dowry or for money, etc. They are bargaining for freedom after marriage. So you can imagine that, sharing freedom after marriage. This is what uh, it says. So if you read a scene like this, you will easily find that gender neutrality is there. But sometimes gender neutrality in the 17th century uh, restoration drama became promiscuity. This is another fear, that you talk about gender neutrality, then you become immoral, you become promiscuous. This is not correct. So we have to read these. When we are teaching gender sensitivity through these texts, we have to give a very sensitive treatment to the text also. We have to understand the young minds and how they are going to accept these things. They should not encourage or enhance gender conditioning. Instead, they should be in such a way that they have understood the connotation of neutrality, which is possible from a positive or a negative point of view. You take a poem like To His Coy Mistress. This has no gender neutrality at all, but it teaches you coy mistress. You look at the description, very shy. Women are supposed to be very shy. You don't speak, don't raise your eyes, don't laugh loudly, don't sit like this, don't stand like this. So, gender typing, typical conditioning. Decondition the mind of all this, not by saying that, you have to protect yourself, everybody else is your enemy, and so on. By saying, give respect as you want to get respect. This is what we have to see. We see this very beautifully in Arthur Miller, American dramatist Arthur Miller. Many of you must have read Death of a Salesman. I'm not giving example from Death of a Salesman because it's mainly a male oriented play. But the man who is the salesman has two sons and so on. The wife's character is very marginal. I'm giving you example from The Crucible of Miller. If you have read it, very good. If you haven't read it, you must read. It's a powerful play because this was a real happening in the Miller's lifetime. It was called McCarthyism, and he compares it to a historical parallel, and that was the Salem witch trial. This is an allegorical text. Like we have so many allegories in literature, this is an allegorical text. But of course, I can't tell you all the details of this text. I can only request you to read. I can tell you the gender aspects. Two women, very powerful women, are there. One is Abigail Williams and the other is Elizabeth Proctor. Elizabeth Proctor is a very important woman character because her husband, John Proctor, is the central character. And he's the one who is indicted for the witch trial. They catch Elizabeth also, but because she is expecting a child, they don't execute her. John is executed. They tell him that you withdraw your statements, we will forgive you. He does not do it. Exactly like Saint Joan, Joan is told, you sign on this saying that I did not do this. Joan says, no, I will not do it. I cannot be false to my own conscience. So John Proctor does that and he dies. All the problem comes because of Abigail, who's a young unmarried girl who John thinks he has fallen in love with. And all the problems begin here. It is Abigail who goes into the court and testifies against John and Elizabeth, because she may think that, if Elizabeth is put to death, then John will belong to her. Anyway, all these aspects are there in the play. You will read. My concern is with these three characters. You find that in the behavior of John and Elizabeth, there is a lot of gender neutrality at the end of the play. Throughout the play, the gender roles are very specific. John Proctor is an authoritarian male. John Proctor is the one who shouts at the maidservant and says, "I'll beat you." That John Proctor changes. This is called gender sensitivity. You know, that change, that evolution which comes into him. And Elizabeth, who's a typical wife, you know, always complaining, always suspicious, comes to understand the husband. Both of them form a complete structure of gender neutrality, where you cannot make out where the male ends and where the female begins. Their psyche becomes a gender neutral psyche. Now you find that feminism or women's freedom is also very dangerous, because Abigail, to save herself, sends many people to death. This is also there, but her behavior, her attitude towards people, to start with, the way she is rebellious, is the beginning of breaking the gender typing. That she doesn't succeed in breaking it makes her the antagonist of the play and makes these two proctors, John and Elizabeth, the protagonists. But for this, you need to analyze the play clearly and understand how all these points can be applied to it. Then you look at this and you look at the names of texts. You know, very important are the names of texts also. If we move to Canada, you might have heard of Margaret Atwood. Many of you have read Canadian literature also. Her book, which we usually used to teach, was called Edible Woman. Edible woman. Imagine that you are giving women the role of fulfilling an appetite. The woman doesn't have any other role. So this is a feminist text. From this feminist text, how are you going to get gender neutrality? That is your research topic. You know, you look at the text, you read the text, you look at the attitude of the boyfriend, and you look at the manner in which this protagonist is handling her life. You find that the title itself gives you a typically gender conditioned role. As opposed to this, you look at the title of Aurobindo's long play, Savitri, or Bankim Chandra's drama. I don't know whether you all read Bengali, but I'm sure in Telugu, English translations are available. And that is Debi Chaudhurani. Debi itself tells you that this is a woman-oriented story. So we are now again coming to the overlap between feminism and gender. You look at these titles and you look at the title of The Edible Woman, you will find that all these titles are talking about women, where usually you might have Tess of the Dubervilles. Tess is a wonderful text for you to do gender analysis. I'm sure almost all of you must have read Tess, Thomas Hardy's Tess of the Dubervilles. So you can do. I'm just giving you ideas. You know, very often my students, scholars who have finished PhD long back, say, "Madam, we want to do a project. Madam, we want to write a research paper." See how research is just lying around? You know, they are like gems. I'll tell you a short story here. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa used to tell this story that, you know, he used to live next to the Ganga. So on the river bed, a huge diamond is lying. People who come for bathing, they rub their feet and clean their feet on the diamond, thinking it is a stone. They use it as a stone to rub their body. They don't know its worth. A jeweler comes and he can easily make out that this is a precious diamond. So he takes it home. You can see how to recognize all the treasures of research which are lying around us, we need to use this jeweler-like eye, this jeweler-like, you know, intuition. So I would like all of you, see, to survive as a teacher, you have to constantly research. And your research papers should enrich your colleges, your universities. This is what you need to do. So here are so many ideas about research, which I have mentioned to you one by one. When you look at Aurobindo's Savitri, you will find that this is the same story, the story of the Mahabharat Savitri, who saves her husband. It's a feminist story, no doubt about it. Savitri is a very important character. And then we use it for women's empowerment, such stories. But there is also an aspect of gender here, very important aspect of gender, because Aurobindo is talking about the raising of consciousness, which does not have a man-woman concept. You know, our minds are suffering because of gender. You remove the gender for it, you make it neutral, the mind becomes that much more open. So here is Savitri being compared to the sun in the first few lines if you read the poem. Then you will find that what is happening in this story is that the story of Savitri is only a framework. The real narrative is the narrative of raising your consciousness to a higher level, to a meditative level, to an intuitive level. And for that, you don't have the difference between men can do it, women can do it, only women can do it, only men can do it, others cannot do, and so on. So this concept of the other, you know, we put it within inverted commas. Whenever we are talking about gender, we put it within inverted commas by saying the other. You have Ramanujan's poem of mothers among other things. Look at the word. He's comparing mother to things, and that to what things? Other things. This has a wonderful way in which you can analyze this short poem, but lot of research from all of you is expected on all this. I won't, of course, go into those. So then we have Devi Chaudhurani of Bankim Chandra, which talks about how a woman is thrown out of the house and then she becomes a very important leader. Of course, she becomes the leader of the dacoits, but that's a different thing. And then when she has a chance to take revenge against her husband, she doesn't take revenge. She still shows that she is proud of her feminine qualities. So gender does not mean that women should become unkind. Kindness is supposed to be inherent in women. What we have to do, we have to make men also kind, women also kind, because you cannot say men are unkind. There are many men who are extremely kind. There are many women who are unkind. So this typing has to go away. And that is what you will learn if you read this text. We have a text of Mahesh Dattani, Dance Like a Man. Look at the title itself, Dance Like a Man. Again, dancing, cooking, etc. These are gender-typed feminist roles. But then the feminists want to break. Radical feminism is saying, let us break. Let us not do this. Their feminism is excellent, which is saying that don't do typing for men and women, that men have to do this, women have to do this. Don't do that. But the mistake is, in the name of equality, you are trying to destroy society. That is not correct. So we are living in a post-feminist generation. The post-feminist generation is wonderful because it is correcting all these faults of more than 100 years back. And therefore, we need to learn from all this. If you read the, ideas, you will find. I'm reminded of a Hindi song. This was, I think, in the black and white era Hindi song. This words go like this. Of course, I can't sing for you. If Annie was here, she would have sung it also. Aadmi hu, aadmi se pyar karta hu. These are the words. I heard it when I was a child. Recently, I saw a movie where this is being used as a parody for a gay relationship. One person comes singing this song. The other person says, take off your clothes. And he gets so scared. But it is not take off your clothes for any physical relationship, but only to exchange their dresses. I don't remember the name of this movie. I'm sure you will come across this. So you can imagine that sensitivity would mean awareness. We are becoming aware, And from this awareness, we are moving towards sensitivity. Unless we have awareness, unless we know what is right, what is wrong, then what is coming from generations, what we describe as patriarchy. Patriarchy is just a way of thinking, a way of enforcing. You cannot say patriarchy is enforced only by one gender. Both the genders have been practicing patriarchy really because they want to do it. Then you read a text like Virginia Woolf's Orlando. Then you read, gendered narratives. These are all there. Ursula Le Guin is there, Left Hand of Darkness. These texts, if you read, you will find that both gendered narrative is there, gender neutral narrative is there. Your research should be to find out where the genders are shown as different, where the genders are shown as neutral, where the genders are given equal respect. So what we learn from literary texts is values. What we learn from literary texts is the way in which we can govern life. Literature is supposed to be humanities. That means it humanizes us. But we don't find that literature is really humanizing us because most of the technical courses did away with literature. For the last 10 years, they have realized that they cannot really do away with literature. So humanities departments or courses in humanities are becoming popular in places like BITS Pilani, which I was told has these courses. That is because they are giving us some kind of training. So literature is not only for aesthetic pleasure. That is one reason for reading literature, that you get some beauty, some entertainment, etc. There is also the didactic element, the element which teaches. So when we want to do gender sensitization, when we want to make a syllabus, when we frame a curriculum, when we do all this, let us think about all the aspects which we have discussed today. I would like all of us to rethink each of the texts which we know, each of the texts on which we have done research. For instance, Dr. Karuna, who did her research under me on the women's voice, men's voices talking about women, can do a lot of research in gender neutrality based on her thesis. She did a very good thesis, but based on that, she can write 10 papers based on this. Because I know her research, I could tell her, all the participants who are here today, I don't know about your research. I don't know about at what level you are today, but I would love to tell you this, that at whatever level you're reading a simple novel, look at all the 3 points which I mentioned. One is gender typing. Second one is equality versus equity. Third one is neutrality. If you, while reading, if you can make a note in a novel of 200 pages, how many places you found which of these things, then you would find that your research paper is almost getting ready. Read up a little theory about this for giving some support to your arguments, and then you have a full research paper ready. I hope all the webinars which we are attending and all what we are participating in would make us academically strong, very humanistic, so that we teach our children to treat men and women and all genders together. If you read Mahesh Natani's plays, you will find a lot about the LGBT. Many texts are there. You read some of the American books, you will find a lot about the protests which are being done by these people who belong to that other genders. These also we need to be very, very sensitive about. This sensitivity has begun, and we have to foster it by real documented research. If I just speak to you like this, it's only casual talking. I'm chatting with you. But when you do genuine research, these things come into the forefront. In India, research is really lagging behind. In all your colleges, research is required. So don't sit back, look around you and start working. Gender sensitivity is an area which you can do a lot of work in, because it will be picked up by all the committees and commissions who have to design the curriculum and syllabus for administering this gender neutralization. Now it is 12 o'clock. I said I would end at 12. So I'm ending exactly at 12. You know, as teachers, we have to be very careful about time. I'm going to switch off my mic now, my audio, because whoever is asking will have their audio on. Once that person finishes, ask the question in as brief as possible, so that in half an hour, maximum number of people can have. Don't labor the question by, you know, as English teachers, we say the same thing in 10 different ways. Our English is good enough to do that, but don't do that. When you are talking, switch on your audio. As soon as you've finished asking the question, you switch it off and I will put on my audio and I will speak. Video is not necessary because anyway, we are only seeing pictures. A day will soon come when all of us will meet face to face. Thank you.
Now I request Anita for a question and answer session. Please proceed with the question, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Now I read out the questions from the participants, ma'am. A question is from Swami Dogala. Do strong women intimidate men? Please elucidate on this, ma'am.
Do strong women intimidate him or intimidate each other?
Intimidate men, only men.
Okay. This is because of our conditioning. I have told you a lot about gender conditioning because we have been taught to look at men differently, women differently. Gender sensitivity will come to you when you feel that when you see a person, you don't look at that person, whether that person is man or woman, but look at them equally as human beings. Till we learn to do that, we have not become gender sensitive. As long as we can distinguish between them, that, you know, it is like racism is saying. Now, if you can make out the white skin from the black skin, that means you are racist in your mind. A time will come when you cannot see the skin color of the person. You treat that person as a person. Similarly, a time will come in the life of people when they will not be able to distinguish that a human being is a woman or a man, not only by looking at dress, etc., but giving them equal treatment, equal attitude. So if you are getting intimidated, if men are getting intimidated by two women, then they are doing wrong, because they are still treating their gender conditioning is guiding their responses. Your response has to be above the gender conditioning which has given you. Once you can do this, it's not easy. You know, for me in 1 hour, I can tell you, but this might take many, many decades for us to achieve, where everybody looks at people as human and not look at each other as men or women. Next question, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question is from Prerna Goel. Ma'am, is a bifurcation between gender studies and feminist studies should be made at all times, even if they're blurring division?
The feminist would imply women's writing. Usually, most of the feminist texts are written by women, and the texts about women which are written by men are also given a feminist study, where they find that men are not able to write about women. So when we talk about women's writing or books about women, we are talking about feminism, feminist studies. Whereas when we are dealing with gender, then we have to look at the text. Doesn't matter by whom it is written. It might be written by a man or woman. But what are we looking at in the text? We are not looking at the way in which women are oppressed. Suppose you read Anita Desai, Shashi Deshpande, etc. You will find that clearly these are feminist texts because they are telling you about the difficulties of women. Here it is not so. You are talking about a gendered narrative where you have relationship between men and women. Look at a text like, the Cocktail Party it's a play by T.S. Eliot. You can read it. And there you find that many characters are men, many are women. They are interacting with each other. And in this interaction, how are they behaving? So gender studies is where we are not looking only at women characters. Feminism is where we are looking at women characters. Gender study is where we are looking at writers of both genders. Feminism, usually we are looking at women writers. So these are very distinct. The moment when gender and feminism overlaps, then you give more importance to women and less importance to men. That means you have destroyed the gender neutrality. Women have got more importance, men have got less importance. Very often when I was there as chairperson or head, I would tell the people who have come for their PhD viva that when they are talking about feminism as their topic, usually they would bring in their own experiences of being a woman. This is not research. Please understand. A man or a woman can do research on feminism. But when we are a researcher, we are neither a man nor a woman. So if you're reading a feminist text as a woman, where you see exactly what has happened to you is happening to the characters in the play, please forget that you are a woman. Please remember you're a researcher. And a researcher cannot be either a man or a woman. That is called gender neutrality. So gender studies are different from feminist studies. Certainly, they are completely different. Next question, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question is from Dr. Alok Gar. Whether gender discrimination is only from the side of men or from the side of women also?
Good question. I think there is a lot of discrimination in all the genders. It is not only one person. Human beings have similar, just like the first question where they say, two women intimidate a man. You see, if 4 or 5 men are standing in a place, women will usually avoid that place and take a roundabout. So what do we see? That in our mind, there is a fear. And that fear is there in both men and women. So many jokes are there about marriage. I'm sure all of you know, where, the men and women have their own grievances and each of them does gender typing. Says that the man can never open their mouth in front of their wife, however smart they might be outside. The woman says, I can never get the remote of the TV because the man always takes the remote. So these are all what are showing us gender typing. Attitudes, gendered attitudes, that a woman should be like this, a man should be like this. When a man is feeling very upset, you don't bother about whether the man is upset or not, because women have the right to be upset. So they say that, women are getting upset, so let them be upset. The man has to be very brave. So you can imagine how both men and women are being very unfair to each other. This unfairness is there in both of them. Gender neutrality would mean, or gender sensitivity would mean, that we forget this aspect and we treat everybody as, a single unit, and that is the human being. Instead of treating as man, woman, or other, we are treating them as single unit, at least in our behaviors, at least in our attitudes, at least in the manner in which they are interacting with each other. When you feel that, you are going to meet some people of the other gender, you become very self-conscious. You feel, oh, I have to behave like this, I have to talk like this, I have to smile like this. Now, what is it that is there in your mind? That, it is not my gender, it is the other gender. This happens to everybody. It happens to men and it happens to women, I'm sure. So we need to get this out. The more and more people thought that if they removed the segregated system of education, where girls, boys study together, right from the childhood, if they are brought up together, they would become gender sensitive. But instead, it has become more criminalization today. Gender sensitivity hasn't come. After generations of studying in co-eds, people are still gender insensitive. So we need to change the mindset. It is not necessarily the physical act of putting them all together in a single classroom that is going to change anything. We have to explain to them how gender neutrality is to be achieved and how we have to be very sensitive about gender. It doesn't mean we have to give up the qualities of our gender. We can be as feminine as we want. Feminine is a different adjective from feminist. Similarly, you can be as masculine as you want instead of being, all the negative chauvinist, etc., which are terms which are used. In fact, I can give you an example of Swami Vivekananda here. In the Thousand Island Park, Swami Vivekananda had many disciples. Some 2 young girls were there. There were about 12 listening to his classes. So the young women were always expecting that he would open the door because he was a man and he would, help them in their long walks, etc. Swamiji said that, this kind of an attitude which men have of opening doors and standing up when you walk into the room or allowing you to go ahead, this is a kind of gender conditioning. Remember that as a young girl, you don't need anybody to open your door. You can open it yourself. This gives you strength. This merges you into a single gender. You don't expect men to be chivalrous. You don't expect women to be weak. All these things are not there. So every text you read, everything you read, you will find that your vision is getting clearer and clearer. Then we have to transfer it to our students because as teachers, that is our job. Thank you. Next question.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question is from Shraboni Mazumdar.
One second. One second. I would like to add something here. This sort of gender stereotyping and gender conditioning, as long as we say pink color is for girls and blue color is for boys, kitchen set is for girls and Lego sets are for boys, I think, Sumita, this sort of conditioning, mind conditioning, should change. So it is all about mindset when you talk about gender sensitivity. Unless this changes, I don't think change comes at all. So what you said, opening the doors, why do we expect? Don't have expectations. So we should train our students, I think, to be like that. So I accept with you, it is the change in the mindset that is very, very important. And I always say, as long as we discriminate, we have to keep celebrating these women days and international women years and so on and so forth, women days and so on. So I always believe that I'm not as a feminist, I'm not arguing as a feminist, but I believe that this sort of mindset or conditioning of the mind, as you rightly said,
Thank you, Usha. Wonderful.
Yeah.
No, that pink and blue thing is also, run into a lot of problems now. And people are still doing it. The kind of, on the flip side of gender conditioning, we have deaths of girl child and all those things. So we can talk about many things. We can talk about the sociological dimension. Maybe you can have some others also speaking on this. But it is a very, very serious issue at present. So I'm very happy Usha added to my point, and we can have long discussions on this, but somebody was trying to ask a question. Shraboni, please ask.
Thank you, ma'am. An introduction, Kamla Das. Ma'am has all the layers of feminism, who speaks of her beingness and tries the means to be masculine. Can you please address in terms of gender intonations when we have to explain?
Okay. So let us talk about Kamala Das's introduction. There, Kamala Das is writing as a feminist writer. I forgot to mention Kamala Das when I mentioned the others. And she's also not, trying to hide that her woman's character has been violated. She is trying to tell you that women have a terrible deal in life, that she's clearly saying. But you can easily make out that she is not attempting to do any gender sensitization. She is not attempting gender neutrality, because by the end of the poem, she becomes an accepting person. She becomes, adaptable to her changes. So protest is not a violent protest. Protest is not, like you say that this is what I will not do. Women saying that, men can have children, women are not going to have children anymore, doesn't make sense. This kind of a protest doesn't make sense. Now, a poet like Kamala Das, if she writes about the problems of women, she remains a feminist. If she tries to resolve the problem by looking at the male point of view and giving you the corrective of not only the female point of view, the male point of view, but also the female point of view, because you will find overtones in introduction where she is forced into marriage by her own parents, her own mother, and the elderly women, and so on. So patriarchy, the real people who are communicating patriarchy are the women. The men are not doing all that much of a job of continuing patriarchy as women are doing. Women are ensuring patriarchy, so you can't really blame men. If you blame men, very good. If you blame women, very good. But blame is only one level of response. The second level of response is what I'm talking about. And that is, can we become sensitive? Not blaming, but learning from that negative to come to a positive. If the negative, the blame game, leads us to a resolution, that is gender sensitivity. If it doesn't lead us to a revolution, we keep reading Kamala Das and telling all women, you be careful, don't get married. It doesn't make sense. Now, when feminists say that, we should not have the marriage, in fact, the breakdown of the marriage system, many people blame on feminism. The family structure's destruction, many people blame on feminism. You can understand how things are working. So feminism became a political power game after some time. We have to understand all these things when we teach a feminist text. And if we tell the students that when you read a feminist text, you can take it as a lesson for sensitization, the text might not give you sensitization, but the text impels you to think about sensitization. I'm sure the younger generation will learn sensitivity from an insensitive text also. Next question, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question is from Arun Sharma. Don't you think the concept of protagonist and antagonist are also an examples of gender neutrality?
All words that we have in our language, are words of hierarchy. You must remember, when you want to analyze a text and talk about protagonist and antagonist, we have plays which have a negative protagonist also. Then who becomes the antagonist? These are all terms which we are using. Nomenclature has a great danger. You must remember that whenever we are using a term, the term has various other antecedent meanings which we also have to learn. So when we are talking about protagonist and antagonist, we are making a hierarchical text. Postmodernism tells us that we should not hierarchize a text. Therefore, we cannot really say if the antagonist, the negative character, is the protagonist of the play, then of the text, then that person also becomes a protagonist only. You remember we had a Hindi movie called Khalnayak. You get many examples like that of anti-hero in the literature right from the classical times to the present. When it comes to the gendered context, now why we use the word protagonist is because the protagonist is a gender neutral word. Earlier we used to use the words hero and heroine. So we removed the word hero and heroine because they are gendered words, and we brought in the word protagonist. That is why we are using it. Now suppose an anti-hero or an anti-heroine becomes the most important character in a text, then we use the word protagonist itself. We don't limit it to antagonist. The last word of your question I couldn't hear. So with whatever little I could hear, I have answered. I hope I have managed to answer your question.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question is from Shri Kuti. Feminism and gender studies are intersectional, right? Then how can you say that feminism is not addressing different genders?
Okay, good question also here. Now, feminism is talking about one gender. You understand? Gender is not only one. Feminism is taking a subjective view of one gender, and that is the feminine gender. Whereas gender study is taking an objective view of both genders. It does not have subjectively supporting man or supporting woman or supporting the other genders. That support is not there. In fact, some of the texts of LGBT might have some, non-gendered narrative because they are supporting this newly emerging genders. That is possible. But when we talk about men, women, and texts and feminist texts, you must remember that feminism, when all feminist research, as much as is going on in our universities around us, is all the time talking about the problems of women. Have you ever seen any feminist research or any feminist text, a literary text, talking about the problems of men? This is not happening. Whereas if you talk about gender studies, if you are talking about an issue, you're talking about the issue without considering whether it is a masculine issue or a feminine issue. When you are talking, take for instance, the freedom struggle. Now, we cannot say that the freedom fighters were only women or only men. They were freedom fighters. So it is not a non-gendered narrative. It's a neutral narrative. Similarly, when we look at, a protest, for instance, you cannot say that the protest belongs to a particular gender only. Therefore, if the focus is on women, it becomes feminism. If the focus is not only on women, focuses on both, then it becomes gender. You have to understand that gender does not talk only about women. Feminism talks only about women, women's experiences, women's exploitation, women's progress, women's empowerment. All this comes under feminism. Whereas, the language also, when we talk about gender neutrality in language, it comes from feminist protest. Feminists said that don't call us as he, don't call us as man. Therefore, it came. There was a time when they wanted to rewrite the Bible. The Bible says God said, and let there be light, and there was light. So God is treated as male. They said, no, we don't want male. We want, female. So these were happening in feminism. If you read the history of feminism, if you read the evolution of feminism, you will understand clearly. Feminism became post-feminist. Gender is still alive because gender is a survival strategy. Feminist might create a distance between men and women. We don't want a distance between men and women. We want an equal partnership between men and women. Men do men's jobs, women do women's jobs. Sometimes women are doing men's jobs, men are doing women's jobs. Nobody is stopping. This is gender neutrality. We need not have compartments, by saying put a man into this compartment, put a woman into this compartment. They have to be imprisoned there only for life. That is not what we are doing. We are trying to associate ideas in such a way that an equal treatment and equanimity, of balance of mind is coming. And I told you, equity is very important, that men are different, women are different, men and women are not the same, but we have to give them fairness. The word fairness also I used. I hope, I don't know whether it is recorded, but I hope what I said earlier, the first 20 minutes of my time I spent telling you a structure of this gender. Only then I came to the literature part of it. Because I'm a teacher of literature, I would love to speak only of literature. But literature in this framework, you need to know that feminism is doing a different job and gender studies is doing a different job. We have to identify that they are doing a different job. Like you have your stomach. Once you eat your lunch, your stomach does a different job, your intestine does a different job, your spleen does a different job, your pancreas does a different job. You cannot confuse them by saying all of them should be equal, but all of them are working together. Otherwise, you have health problems. Similarly, in a society which is working well, men and women need to be not only doing equal jobs, but they also need to live together in amity. This is not happening. And if feminism, I'm saying if, please understand, all those who are doing feminist research, don't think, I have also written many articles on feminism, but please remember that if feminism is creating a social divide between men and women, then feminism is opposite of gender studies. If feminism is helping us to understand women and men, then you have to understand that it is going in an evolutionary process. Next question.
Now I request if any participants are interested to ask a question directly to ma'am, you can ask by unmuting your microphones.
Hello.
Please ask.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Prashant Kumar.
Very often we find feminist activism transforming into feminist overreach. To what extent does this overreach dissuade the society from accepting gender equality or neutrality?
Just give me 1 minute. I think somebody is at the door.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
Next
Please
questioner, get ready. I will come in a minute. Sorry. But could you repeat your, Prashant Kumar, could you repeat your question, please?
Sure, ma'am. I asked, very often we find feminist activism transforming into feminist overreach. To what extent does overreach dissuade the society from accepting gender equality?
See, now in the post-feminist era, this question is little dated because this debate was very rampant in the 20th century, the middle of the 20th century. But today it is not there because we have moved into a post-feminist era. Now, what is happening is that, the radical feminism, which is how feminism started, initially it was very radical. That was tempered down. If you read Elaine Showalter and all, you will find that feminism was much more tempered. And then they came to understanding that feminism was becoming a power structure, like, any Marxism or any of the isms. So they didn't want that power structure, because that power structure was creating a separate, hierarchy. That was not acceptable. At the turn of the 20th century, this kind of a hierarchizing was not acceptable. Therefore, what we have to do today is, if you read the current post-feminist dialectic, you will find that it is moving towards gender neutrality. It is moving towards equality. But society has not moved. You find a lot of gender discrimination in society today, which is targeted at women. So you cannot say that we have reached a point where we don't need feminism or we don't need empowerment. That we cannot say. But the word overreach which you used was relevant in the 1960s, or in the year 2000, it's 1950s, 1960s, etc., when they were really fighting for certain things. After the Second World War, that is when the overreach point came. But today, I don't think we can talk about this as an overreach. Certainly, feminist texts are being written from a very powerful, only feminist perspective. But there are many theorists who are working on gender, and they are toning down the ideas of feminism to fit into gender. It's an evolution. The process has begun, but the evolution is continuing. Maybe some of you will write some texts which will have feminism evolving into gender studies. Then they will read it in the MA class. Okay, all the best for your writing. Now it is 12:30. We are supposed to end at 12:30. I don't
Hello,
know.
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Due to lack of time, couldn't answer all the questions. We will answer the remaining questions through your mail. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, participants.
Let
Should
me
I?
take the opportunity to thank Sumita. Give me 1 minute time. I would like to thank you personally.
Okay, okay.
Thank you,
Usha.
Dr. Sumita.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for honoring my request and for the excellent presentation that you made. You are a reservoir of knowledge. You are a reservoir of knowledge and an inspiration. You ignite the minds of students and you encourage them to think out of the box. We are very, very fortunate to have you today. I know your very busy schedule, and I always wonder how productive you are with your research work, teaching, extension lectures, TEDx lectures. Inspiring, very, very inspiring friend I have. I'm very proud to have you as my great friend. And thank you for being the wonderful speaker and a wonderful presentation today that you made. You were crystal clear. What I believe, Sumita, is that teaching community should not be left behind in the race of this technology or time. Therefore, I was planning, maybe people are little stressed out because of my schedule that I have given to them as webinars. But I asked them to be very comfortable, stay at home, just as you are speaking from your home and I am speaking from my home. I want them to do that, but I want them to be with the to be competitive and establish AMS as one of the best institutions and trying to get A grade. And as a great researcher, I always feel you are very, very inspiring, because a great teacher sometimes, many a time, are not great researchers, and great researchers are not teachers, but you are both. You are a great teacher, a great researcher, and I'm really happy and thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being with us today. And I feel the onus is on us, especially teachers, to prepare our students in a way that they are globally relevant and yet they are sensitive to the needs of the society. And gender sensitivity, I'm sure, is one such area where we need to really sensitize everybody, not just men, even women need to be sensitized. And as I was going through the literature long time back, because I was on one committee of this harassment and sexual harassment, etc., so I had to just make myself prepared to go before I went there. Then I was wondering that there is an this global level organization, UNDP, United Nations Development Program, which advocates change and connects countries to knowledge, experience, and resources. It helps people build a better life for themselves. And this UNDP has prescribed certain principles for gender sensitive communication. And these principles, 6 principles that it has prescribed, I want you to go to the next slide. Principles, whoever is showing. Okay. Go to the third slide where you are having principles. Yeah. So these 6 principles, I feel like ensure that women and men are represented, and challenge all the gender stereotypes, avoid exclusionary forms, use equal forms of address, create a gender balance, and promote gender equity through titles. So UNDP has certain goals, and they have prescribed that imprecise word choices can be interpreted as discriminatory, demeaning, or biased, regardless of how they are intended. Such language hinders efforts to increase women's empowerment and is not in accordance with UNDP's goals. So they have prescribed these principles, and I was at the global level, I was really surprised that we are talking about this issue as a issue of importance everywhere. It's not just we in India, we talk about patriotic society, etc., patriarchy society, but everywhere I think this problem of discrimination is there. And unless we sensitize ourselves and we sensitize our students, it is not necessarily that we should talk about men and women, because this starts from every family. I feel it's every family should yeah. And therefore it was excellent presentation made by you. I am really grateful to you, and thank you once again on behalf of the college and on my own behalf, and as a good friend, I really take pride in you, Subhita. Thank you so much for being with us today, for a wonderful speech that you have given. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Usha. I came only for your sake, and I'm happy that I could do what you wanted.
Yes, all the participants, I am sure they must have enjoyed. We had more than 200 registrations. Yesterday we had 300 registrations. I think today we had more than 200 participants, and everybody must have benefited because of your presentation. It was really good. And you have given them insights about the research on this gender sensitivity area, which is very, very important, because people are search for topics for research, and this is one good area for their research. It was really very good, very inspiring.
Thank you.
Ma'am, Smita Rai, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes. Namaste, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Naresh.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Karuna. Rajendra, all thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, once again.
I'm now leaving, Karuna.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. बंद कर दो मैम। उन्हें ऐसे क्यों कर रहे, नहीं तो मैं तो वोट ऑफ थैंक्स बोलती थी। अभी अभी मैं बोले तो और गुस्सा करती कि
Karuna, your mic is not switched off. It is still on. I am able to hear you.